Good evening and welcome to Kunsong Payal Choling and to a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo. This teaching is entitled Renunciation in Vajrayana, and it was originally taught in 1991, and I hope you will find it interesting. So glad you're joining us, and we will begin now.
There are, generally speaking, no magic formulas. There's nothing that you can have or buy or take in your mouth or earn in an ordinary sense that will bring about happiness. We do spend our entire lives trying to be happy, without question. We spend our entire life trying to be happy and engaging in whatever method we can possibly think of to make us happy. And often that leads us on some very fruitless paths with no proper ending. Many of us spend a great deal of time cultivating certain kinds of relationships in order to be happy, and ultimately they will fail or we will lose them. Then others of us maintain a great deal of time cultivating certain materialistic searchings, and havings that ultimately bring us no joy. And then others of us engage in certain other more subtle kinds of manipulation of our environment. And that these kinds of doings never really satisfy us, because one cannot manipulate one's environment in such a way as to be truly happy. This cannot happen. In order to have happiness, in order to have the fruit of happiness, you must plant the seed of happiness. And that is by creating the causes of happiness. And this is the single foundational teaching that the Buddha has given us that we forget consistently. We constantly become engaged in activity that does not produce happiness. And so we are utterly disappointed. And often we can be deluded to the point where we think that we spend our whole lives in spiritual pursuit. But we miss the one essential point. That compassion brings happiness. That generosity brings goodness. And we do not create the building blocks that say to ourselves, spirituality must not work. And we say, I have engaged my life in meditation or in some kind of spiritual pursuit, or I've lived a spiritual life, I eat health food and get back rubs on a regular basis and live the good life, and still I have not been happy. And of course we delude ourselves, therefore, into thinking that there's something wrong with the spiritual process. And of course that's not true. It's just that we have forgotten, once again, how to be happy. We've forgotten how to make happiness. So in reminding the children from the time that they are very young, perhaps by the time they're our age, they won't be quite as dumb as we are. Maybe they'll get the big picture. It seems to me that they already are. It's fortunate that they have not become involved in killing. They have not become involved in doing some of the things that we ourselves, as I have confessed, have done when we were younger. And I think that's very valuable. They've saved themselves already a great deal of pain, a great deal of suffering. And the Buddha teaches us especially that we cannot become involved in killing. Actually, the teaching is that killing will shorten our own life force. Sometimes we blame, as Christians or as people that believe in a theological religious system, we see, for instance, a young child born who dies at birth, or a young child born who is born with some crippling disease and never is able to gain their strength. And we wonder, how can God be so unfair? How can that suffering occur in this world? How can that be? And of course, according to the Buddha teaching, it is because in some previous life we unfortunately cannot remember. We have created the causes for a shortened life force. The shortened life force can be brought about by killings. I think about all the fishing that I've done and wonder what's going to happen in the future. Fortunately, I have the Buddha's teaching to help purify some of these causes through my practice. And I try in my way to propagate the Buddha's teaching and to be kind. And therefore, in doing that, perhaps I will purify my own mind, as well as be of some benefit to others. But we all have engaged in these things. As little children, we stepped on ants and did all kinds of things. And ultimately, we have caused ourselves to suffer. We have brought suffering on ourselves. So we use the method that the Buddha gives us to purify some of that through kindness, generosity, offering, meditation, prayer, study, contemplation. Through these many different ways, we purify our mind streams and therefore strengthen our life force and live a better life. The children's teaching, therefore, should serve as a good reminder to us. And I'd like to continue, as our part of the class today, I would like to continue to speak of some of the great benefits of Vajrayana Buddhism, and particularly to speak of and this is a teaching that I give very frequently, to speak of the need to engage in true renunciation, that is to say, renunciation from the heart. In the Buddhist system, there are many ways to engage in renunciation. There is a very visible, very exacting method of following the Vinaya very strictly. The Vinaya is a set of teachings that were given to us by the Buddha as to how to eradicate the causes of suffering and bring about extraordinary benefit. And in following the Vinaya, one can take robes as a monk or a nun. And in living as a monk or a nun, one drinks no alcohol, one is celibate, one does not lie at all. So never ask a monk or a nun how you look today unless you're sure you look well. They have to tell you. Except that I have a nun that helps me in the kitchen, and I've instructed her never to really hold to that teaching in the Vinaya. No, just kidding. Just kidding. It's one that she has to break. I have better sense than to ask a nun how I look. But anyway, they cannot engage in stealing, of course, and there are many different things that they cannot do. In fact, there are over 250 some odd rules to stick to. Some of them, if broken, are very minor infractions. Some of them are main infractions and very, very important and cannot be broken under any circumstances. And that keeping of those vows is based on renunciation. It is based on looking at cyclic existence and seeing that it has many faults. Seeing that no matter what one accomplishes within the realm of cyclic existence, that even if one accomplishes every single extraordinary benefit, if one does accomplish every benefit, then still that benefit will come to an end. In that we really cannot live more than 100 years. So whatever we have accumulated in an ordinary sense during that time, we will have to abandon at the time of our death. In fact, the Buddha teaches that we cannot take so much as one sesame seed with us at the time of our death. And I think that most of us have accumulated much more than one sesame seed. So, in that sense, cyclic existence is disappointing. Cyclic existence is also disappointing in that while one can experience happiness and joy in cyclic existence, one will also experience at least equal proportions of unhappiness and suffering. In fact, many of us become quite used to that in the sense that we will actually engage in some joyful activity and feel very happy, feel very lifted up with happiness, and actually have a corner in the back of our mind where we know that if we're happy now, that soon unhappiness is right behind it. And we know that if we're happy now, that pretty soon it's going to come to an end. So the suffering of impermanence is difficult. And the suffering of suffering is difficult, in that since there is suffering in cyclic existence, we do suffer from it. We do experience suffering. And there is no one that I know that has not experienced suffering at some time. Furthermore, we look around us and we see that all sentient beings are suffering. It's not just us. If it were just us, it might be bearable. You can see that, can't you? But we might be able to take it, because after all, none of us is bleeding. Our backs are not broken. To my knowledge, none of us is in excruciating pain right now. Maybe some, but not much. So it's bearable from this point of view. But if we look around us, we see that most sentient beings, actually the great majority, are suffering far more than us. And as a renunciate, one looks around and truly examines that. One sees, for instance, that in the animal realm, animals are greatly victimized by their own stupidity or dullness. That a perfectly powerful and strong, for instance, elephant can become completely victimized by a circus keeper if the circus keeper knows how to manipulate that elephant. And so the elephant is therefore victimized by its own stupidity. And for instance, even if you look at people, human beings, you can see that many human beings suffer intensely from their own anger and from nothing else. None of their life situations are so unbearable that they cannot lift themselves up with strength and dignity. But instead, they let their minds revolve in such a way that they are bitter and angry and regretful and vengeful. And in that way, they suffer from their own minds. And it's probably some of the most potent suffering that there is. We should have great compassion for people in that situation. Then there are other realms that we cannot even see. The Buddha teaches us that there are physical and non-physical realms, and that in some of the non-physical realms, there are many different kinds of suffering that are inconceivable to us. For instance, there is one realm called the realm of hungry ghosts. And in that realm, there are non-physical beings that are filled with desire to such an extraordinary extent that they cannot be satisfied. And that these beings just sort of wander with a kind of lust and neediness in their minds. Well, I guess we can all imagine what that's like. Each of us has experienced periods of time where we had great neediness or great lusting or some grasping that could not be satisfied. Each of us has experienced that, whether it's in relationships or whether it's in concerning material goods or whether it's just about our lives in general. We have all experienced periods like that, so we can sympathize with how awful that would be. All of these sentient beings then are suffering from their own minds. And the Buddha teaches us that the bottom line of that suffering is desire. And that if we did not have desire as the very foundation of all of our perceptual process and thought process, that we would not be suffering as we do. And so for that reason, renunciates take robes and they renounce cyclic existence, actually seeing its faults. It's not that they kill themselves and leave it, but they see its faults. They see it, they look it square in the face. And furthermore, they see that other sentient beings are truly suffering. And therefore, from that point of view, they try, day by day, one day at a time, living as strongly and as firmly as they can, to renounce cyclic existence. It's not an easy thing to do, and no one does it perfectly. But we begin. And that's how we begin. And there are others that choose not to take robes, myself included. And in the Vajrayana path, we are offered the alternative of maintaining renunciation through utilizing the same method. And the method would be involved with actually viewing cyclic existence in the same way, actually seeing its faults in the same way, coming to the same conclusions in the same way, and seeing also the suffering of sentient beings. And perhaps from the Vajrayana point of view, one would actually not so much engage in, it's not to say that you would not engage in, but you would not emphasize the Vinaya rules of renunciation as the monks and nuns do, but you would emphasize the vow of bodhicitta. You would actually emphasize the vow to live a life of compassion in order to benefit sentient beings. And in emphasizing that, you more closely examine that all sentient beings are suffering, and you practice renunciation in the heart. You live in cyclic existence, you do things that other people do, you live in an ordinary life, but in your mind, you maintain this firm commitment, or a conviction rather, I should say, that in cyclic existence there can be no permanent happiness unless one creates the causes of happiness. There can be no happiness at all. Then we examine that the Buddha has also taught us that in fact there is only one permanent happiness, and that permanent happiness is the cessation of suffering, the ultimate cessation of suffering. And that cessation of suffering is actually called enlightenment. There is no other cessation of suffering. The cessation of suffering can only be brought about by practicing the path clearly and surely and succinctly in order to achieve the result of enlightenment. One cannot actually travel through cyclic existence in some ordinary way, just simply meandering through cyclic existence and come to a spontaneous moment of enlightenment. Unfortunately, many of us have a very deluded idea of what enlightenment is like and what it actually, how it actually comes about. Many of us feel that we are waiting on enlightenment. Many of us feel that we are moving through some natural evolutionary process in which the process itself somehow has an intelligence sufficient enough to move us step by step by step. We think that we have no real responsibility to do anything, and somehow we will naturally evolve in the same way that seed grows into a tree. And that through that natural evolution, and when we come to the end of our time, we will simply spontaneously burst into mastery or burst into enlightenment. Well, the Buddha actually teaches us that no, that is not true. That is not true. There is no natural process in cyclic existence that will spontaneously lead to enlightenment. That's an important fact. I hope that all of you can really hear that, really listen to that. The reason why that is so important is because it's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking like that. We just have the tendency to meander through our lives and just continue. But the Buddha teaches us that within cyclic existence, we must understand what cyclic existence is actually made of. It's actually made of interdependent arisings of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, creating the illusion of continuum based on the belief in self-nature as being inherently real. Based on that illusion of continuum, we believe that we are continuing in a progressive way. Some of us do not have that belief or do not understand the idea of evolution or progression. But the Buddha teaches us that cyclic existence actually is based on interdependent cause and arisings, and that cause always begets effect. And effect will always act as new cause for future effect, as well as being effect itself. And so cause and effect continue to rise interdependently. Now the Buddha teaches us that the good news is that there is a method that you can employ to create the auspicious causes to bring about the effect that you desire. In other words, you can steer your own car. The steering wheel is in your hands. That's the good news. Because then you're not victimized by eternity or some foolish notion like that. You're not simply waiting and hoping that you are not the only one that somehow the universe misses. You know, you have control. You can, if you wish to achieve enlightenment, you can create the causes for enlightenment. If you wish to end your suffering, you can create the causes to end your suffering. You can, if you are suffering, act in a pure, kind, concerned, and loving way, and therefore end your suffering. You have that power. The jewel is in your hand, and you can use it at any time. But the bad news is, for those of us who like to go the easy way, we can't just sort of fool around for hundreds of thousands of years. The things will come together for us in some natural way. And those of us that are extremely passive by nature and hope that eventually we'll be able to experience some revelation just in the same way that one would receive a birthday present, or in the same way that some unexpected turn of events would simply ripen within our lives. Those of us that are waiting on a circumstance like that, who really don't want to engage in any activity that brings about benefit, those people may be sad to hear the news. But I, for one, feel that in terms of practice, it's much like walking through a dark room. Much like walking through a room, in the sense that if one wants to get from one entrance into the room, across the room, out the next entrance of the room, if one wants to make a journey like that, you have a choice of making the journey with all of the windows closed and the lights turned off, the shades drawn and the lights turned off, and making that journey in the dark, knowing that there are obstacles in the room, knowing that there are things in the room that you might stumble over. You just engage in mindless motion and hope you don't break a leg on the way. You have that choice. Or you can do as I feel I must do, being a semi-intelligent woman. I feel that I've got to throw open the shades, and if it's dark outside, I've got to turn on the light. And I've got to open my eyes, too, not only turn on the light. It doesn't help to turn on the light if you don't open your eyes. I've got to open my eyes, and I've got to see exactly what's in that room, and I've got to walk around it, or I've got to step over it, or I've got to duck under it. And being engaged in cyclic existence is very much like that. You have that choice. So as a renunciate, one sees the faults of cyclic existence. One really measures them and stares them straight down without fear and with a great deal of what we call Vajra courage, and acts accordingly. And it's in the acting, it's in the taking the power of experiencing liberation. It's in being able to walk through the door of liberation that one is grateful for the path. In Vajrayana Buddhism particularly, there are a great many opportunities to practice in some extraordinary and profound way. Not only through renunciation, not only through general Mahayana practices, such as the practice of compassion and developing a great respect for cause and effect relationships, for karma, but also through deepened practice. In Vajrayana Buddhism, there are many levels of practice, from the most preliminary to the intermediate to the ultimate completion stage practices. They begin with preliminary practice that simply purify the gross defilements within one's mind stream, and ultimately one practices Dzogchen practices that are particularly meant to remove utterly all contrivance and all conceptualization from the mind stream so that one can actually awaken to the primordial wisdom state. This kind of practice is the kind of practice that must be practiced very deeply, because it isn't the kind of thing that one can simply do by rote. If one simply accumulates a certain amount of this kind of practice, then one will have a collection of that practice at the end, and then you can trade them in, like green stamps. You can, that we used to collect when I was a lot younger. You would trade them in for certain gifts. It isn't like that. One actually has to practice to the degree that one sincerely intends to and actually accomplishes the removing of all contrivance, all notion, all discrimination from the mind stream. One has to accomplish that view sufficiently to be able to unfix the mind from the process of fixation that is found in cyclic existence and liberate the perceptual process so that the primordial wisdom state can be viewed in its natural and relaxed way. And this has to be done well in order to bring the good result. But particularly, there are other practices that one can do within Vajrayana, and it's a very complicated technology. And these practices are actually meant to to help us at certain points where it is possible to make great gains. For instance, there is one kind of practice that we very commonly do in Vajrayana practice, which is generation stage practice, in which one meditates on shunyata, meditates on the empty state, and then arises from that empty state first as a wave of compassion, compassionate intention, and then as a power syllable or seed syllable, such as hung, hri, bam, or some of the others. And arising as that seed syllable, then one generates oneself as the primordial wisdom deity, meaning enlightened Buddha or realized bodhisattva, as a primordial wisdom being. Visualizing that one is no longer one's ordinary self, but one then becomes a being arising from the primordial wisdom state with all of the auspicious qualities of the primordial wisdom being. And in that way, one actually begins a process, and here's the bottom line, of familiarizing oneself with the qualities and display of the primordial wisdom nature. That is to say that while one may not actually be meditating on the primordial wisdom nature directly or experiencing emptiness, one becomes very familiar with the display or luminosity of emptiness. And the goal of that is that when one actually leaves the physical body and all of the elements dissolve, when one dies, one will come to recognize that display in the bardo, in the intermediate state. And in recognizing that display, one will recognize one's own nature in some way, or recognize the display of one's own nature. And in recognizing the display of one's own nature, one will simply not react against one's mind or experience total duality, but instead one will recognize the nature, awaken in a sense. And then there are other kinds of practices as well, like the Poa practice, in which one actually learns to negotiate the mind essence, or the consciousness, if you will, out of the central channel, and negotiate transferring that consciousness from the ignorant state that we experience in cyclic existence to the knowing state or the wisdom state through our meditation. And there are many components in the POA practice. One strong component is devotion. Devotion for the primordial wisdom nature, the Buddha nature displayed as Buddha Amitabha. And one actually experiences that, or one actually considers that one transfers one's consciousness to what is called Dewachen, which is actually the Dharmakaya realization. It's actually a level of awareness, if you can think of it that way, even though those aren't proper words, that is far beyond what we as sentient beings can understand. It is the awakening to the nature, the awakening to wisdom. And we can learn to transfer our consciousness to that state through devotion, through visualization, through some mantra recitation, and actually through using the expulsion of wind through the central channel. So that even if one were not able to practice in retreat until one realized the Dzogchen practices, one would certainly be able to practice some of these intermediate practices and have the auspicious result. But at any rate, the point that I'm trying to make overall is that one has to practice something, some technology, to get the result, you see. To wait until the time of death and simply hope for the best because you think that maybe it will come to you what to do is not a good idea. It's just not a good idea. And right before the moment that you actually die, and unfortunately all of us will, we will stare ourselves in the face and see what we have done, and we will decide at that time whether it was a good idea that we didn't practice POA. And I know of no one at the time of their death that said, darn, you know, I practiced POA and I'm really sorry now. Or I know of no one at the time of their death that said, well, gee, you know, now I'm entering into the bardo and shoot, I wish I hadn't generated myself as the primordial wisdom deity, and I don't know why I've spent so much time in practice. I just wish I'd had more fun. No one says that, believe me. Because at the time of your death, all of the elements associated with physical incarnation dissolve. And at that point, you are faced with the mind. That's it. Nothing else but the experience of continuum. And it will either continue on through the bardo into the next life, under whatever conditions you have earned, duly earned, or at that point, in seeing the mind displayed as it is, one, through the force of one's meditation or one's practice, will recognize that mind, recognize its display, and experience the precious non-dual state. And there are many points during the bardo experience at which one can make what I would call quantum leaps, and different kinds of practices will help one at each point. But believe me, while sentient beings cannot remember this, we have all experienced the bardo many, many times. We have died and been reborn. We have died and been reborn many, many times, uncountable times. And at no time, through some natural cause, at no time, without applying the technology and silly practicing, have we ever just accidentally achieved enlightenment. Never. That has never happened. One does not accidentally achieve enlightenment. And one does not do it because one is a very old soul, another popular concept. One doesn't simply age into enlightenment. I'm aging, and I know that if I just aged without practicing, I wouldn't age into enlightenment. And I know that no one else will either. Not in this life, and not in many lives put together. One has to apply the technology. The Buddha teaches us that there is happiness. That happiness is the cessation of suffering, because under the condition of the cessation of suffering, we experience the primordial wisdom state, which is bliss. It is pure bliss, and nothing other than bliss. It cannot be described. But in order to achieve that, one simply must apply the proper technology. Fixed as we are in the belief in self-nature as being inherently real, fixed as we are in this process of fixation that we experience as the continuum of self moving through time and space, we cannot awaken, we cannot taste, we cannot touch. We have never had the experience of pure luminosity, uncontrived luminosity. We have had some peak experiences in our meditation, sure. People come and tell me about them all the time, but they are not that, and you should be clear on that. Because that experience of pure luminosity, of uncontrived primordial view, in its natural state is Buddhahood. And I don't see any Buddhas in this room. I see everyone in this room having the seed potential of Buddhahood, having the Buddha nature within them, but none of us was born on a lotus. And that being the case, we must then take ourselves in hand and apply the appropriate technology. And it's best to use the technology that you know has worked for others and that is accessible to you. There's no sense standing here in America and wishing you could go practice in a Zen monastery in Japan somewhere if you can't get to Japan. And there's no sense standing here in America wishing that you had been born in the Himalayas. Here in America, find a technology that works, that has brought enlightenment to others before. That has brought enlightenment to others before. Important fact. Not something that was developed 20 years ago by someone that had a great idea. But something that works. And then follow that technology. Practice it. And according to how well you practice it, and how sincere you are in your effort, to that extent, you will be successful. What I like about Vajrayana Buddhism is that it's short, and I'm lazy. Works fast, and I'm in a hurry. It's powerful, and I like that in a practice. And what I like about Buddhism in general is that I can look at the Buddha and I know that it has produced enlightenment, but not only in him, in many hundreds of thousands of his disciples, with reportable and repeatable and exacting signs of enlightenment. Those are the things that you look for, not just talk, signs. And that being the case, I feel that if I and my friends are going to cross the ocean of suffering, we're going to do it in a boat that doesn't leak, or a boat that's made the journey many times before and proven itself to be seaworthy, and furthermore, with an excellent captain. So these are my ideas, and I hope that you are interested in them. I hope that somehow they will be of benefit to you. Certainly you are welcome to come and practice Vajrayana Buddhism at any time. You are welcome to get your feet wet without actually diving in. I know Americans are big on that. And that's actually a very good idea. By coming to Sunday teachings and examining what the teachings are about, and furthermore, examining the teacher and examining the method, and trying not to be too deluded when you do it, and in that way, determining for yourself whether it is useful for you, whether you feel that you have a connection, whether you feel that you have the appropriate hook within you to be hooked onto. One thing that I should add in closing is to remember not to waste your life. I look at myself now, and I can confidently, publicly announce that I am 41 years old. And being 41 years old, I know that I've wasted a lot of time. And I'm pretty good at this stuff. I like it. But I also know that I've wasted a lot of time. And I know most of my friends have wasted a lot of time. And I know most of my students waste an awful lot of time. So I've made a real determination that I'm going to try to be consistently mindful and to uphold the view in the Vajrayana way throughout the course of my day. And in order to do that, one has to practice mindfulness. But I know that we can easily walk through, you can lose days, can't you? You can lose weeks, you can use months, you can lose years, you can just meander through life. And that's one thing, because we can find little bits of happiness here and there according to the ripening of our karma. But if we meander through life, we'll also have to meander through the bardo. And that is not what you want to do. So the thing to do is take hold of ourselves now and make use of this incarnation. It's already auspicious. You are humans. You have all your faculties complete. You're not stupid. You're intelligent enough to hear teaching and understand it. You can practice. You have the leisure to practice. You don't have to work 24 hours a day. You have the leisure to practice, even if you hold down a full-time job. And you have met with the teaching, and you have met with a teacher. Therefore, you have all the auspicious circumstances. And if you utilize them, it's like going to a continent full of precious jewels and coming back with a handful of them that are precious beyond belief. If you don't use any of those auspicious circumstances, it's like going to a continent full of precious jewels and coming back forgetful and empty-handed and remaining in poverty. So please consider the importance of this precious human rebirth and consider the importance of meeting with the path. So thank you very much for listening to my mindless babble.
Thank you very, very much for joining us today. Excuse me. And I hope you'll come back for other teachings by Jetsunma. Hope you enjoyed it. Sorry for the hiccups there in the feed. I'm not quite sure. Never mind. We'll try to fix them. But these teachings are shown. They are from previously recorded sessions over the last 30, 40 years, something like that. And they are shown on Wednesdays at 7:30, like now on YouTube, and Sundays at 11 a.m. To give you an opportunity to kind of set a date and time to watch them. I know it's sometimes easier to do that than any other way. And in addition, if you're interested, we also have a couple of our nuns who teach meditation also on YouTube, Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m. So you could do a double whammy on Sunday. We have Jetsunma did a short medicine Buddha practice that she compiled, I think is probably the best word. She condensed a lot of practice that was much longer into something that could be done in about 15 minutes in English, and that would work for Americans in this time, or work for Westerners who are busy and have the Western lifestyle, not just Americans. But it was originally created for the COVID situation, but is applicable to any kind of sickness or illness or physical pain, whatever. Medicine Buddha is there for all of it. So if you want to come practice with us every evening at 7 p.m., come join us on Facebook Live. Daily, we have a food offering ceremony here at the temple. It's offered up on Zoom, and you're welcome to join us. It's a soak offering, food feast. The idea is to generate a lot of merit, make all of these offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and to then use that merit and offer it up for the benefit of all beings. Monday through Friday at 5:30, we have this, again on Zoom, Saturdays at noon, and then Sundays at 2 p.m. We go live at the Guru Rinpoche statue outside, and you're welcome to come join us outside. So come and have a live practice with us. We'd love to have you join us, whether you know it or not. But if you go to the calendar on tara.org, it'll be on the page that says, webcasts and calendars under Meditate, Pray, Study. You can click on the event itself, and it will tell you not just where to go, but it will also give you a link to download the practice so that you can join in. So we welcome you at any time, anywhere. On the weekend, the prayer room is open from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., Saturdays and Sundays. And so you can come inside as well as visit us outside. The outside is open always during the day. It's dawn to dusk, and we totally invite you to come. We just got in the sweetest, cutest 4 baby goats, and they are just adorable. Bring the kids. It's a lot of fun. And they can help, feed the little goats and have some good times. The outside is just beautiful, and the weather's getting better, and there are statues and stupas and sacred places everywhere, and lots of space to walk. The 65-acre Peace Park is the trails are all open now, and so it's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. And you're always welcome. So thanks for being here, and we hope to see you soon. If you wish to make an offering to Jetsunma, having received a teaching from her, you can do that anytime. You can connect with her PayPal account, which is jetsumagift@gmail.com, and make whatever offering you'd like to do. And otherwise, we hope to see you soon. We hope you connect with us and stay in the family. Thank you so much. Have a great day and a great week.